Let's see. The things that have been turning around in my head as I've been thinking about the salary topic, particularly at this time of year, because we've been in the sort of annual. Although people should get raises as they improve. It's that time when we all say, how did everyone do last year, and what should we do about that information? And so the things that I've been contending with start with. The interaction with somebody when they come in the door, and we say, this is a person who has virtue or skill or rightness for our company, and we want them to work here. And now we have to have the conversation that says how much they should get paid. And the challenge there in like initial salary that has tons of inputs, simple market inputs, things that change very, very frequently, or especially when you have a hot market where it seems like year over year the rates go far in excess of where it seems like they should, particularly when there's a lot of people hiring in one area. And then additionally, in relation to existing, and maybe I should write here fairness, but like existing employees and their skill levels versus somebody who's coming in new but has different market expectations, and what is the right thing to do under those circumstances, and then like what level of give or how much it should play a role in like how we want to position our companies in an offer anyway, because it seems like that's the thing that people want to push on when they're saying, well, I'm good with everything else that's in here in this document, but the thing that I would like to know is, can you move any on money, and how or what the right way is to message that when it seems like that just competing on money isn't the thing that would make the biggest difference anyway. And so like how you balance compensation with respect to market and other things like lifestyle, culture, what's available to learn at that company, and how much salary should be part of the message of why it would be great for you to work here. And so that whole initial discussion is hard and protracted, but I think worth honing. And then there's the question that comes to mind for someone who's starting very young in the industry, because typically when someone starts, right out of college, or perhaps not even out of college, they have we're reaching for people who have a great deal of promise. Because you can get them cheap. You can kind of mold some habits it might be harder to mold habits in somebody who's already built up a lot of habits from somewhere else. So there's a lot of exciting things about pulling people who are young in the craft. The challenge there is that typically for someone who's, I'm going to start as calling them an apprentice, if you're pulling the right people in your apprentice group, maybe out of your campus hiring program or just out of the people that you run into, typically you're looking for people who are very fast learners and who have a great skill set. And that means that for those first couple of years where they're new, they are, if we hired right, they're going to like shoot through the roof in skill level. And then it seems like that in many cases, the right thing for them in order to like advance their career the fastest is to, in about 2 or 3 years, switch jobs. Okay. And so for those apprentices, how do you build? I mean, like salary is the top of the night. There's lots of other things about how you want to retain them, but like, what's the right way to balance what we're comfortable increasing, or how we're comfortable moving on salary year to year, in order to make sure that you're not just blowing the top off of your budget, but that you're not wasting that investment that you make in the first couple of years in somebody who's coming into your group. And so how much is too much? That's one question. And then I think the big thing for me is how to stop that feeling of like, after 2 years I've got to move, or else I'm never going to grow here the same way that I
maybe the way I've phrased it in the past has been internal and external value.
Yeah.
Whenever there becomes a dissonance between the value I get inside the company and the value I can get outside the company.
Internal versus external value. That's good. Great. And then there's the ongoing discussion that like we're having right now, where it's the end of the year and we have to figure out, here's what we're paying everybody, and what would we do to make this most right? So that ongoing review process and what things should really tie in to an increase, like how much should performance flashes, where somebody's done a really great job in the last 3 months because there was maybe pressure on them, how much should temporary is probably not the right word, but like direct, meaningful, recent experiences shape somebody's salary trajectory. how should recent performance factor in? And then additionally, what should you do in those cases where you've got somebody who is perhaps significantly underpaid compared to everyone else with their skill level, but it's just not somebody who's ever going to talk about salary because that's not the thing they do. Are you good with that because they're not asking, so it's not a big deal, or how much are you willing, or how much is right to advocate for somebody who's not going to advocate for themselves, and which is not an uncommon problem for a certain breed of software developer. If you guys are all software engineers,
we all are. Is that right? All of
yeah.
us are software.
And then part of that ongoing message is like, what are you willing to do at various levels of retention for somebody who's essentially saying like, I've not been able to get the move I wanted, so here's my offer from another company. What are you going to do about it? Like, I've heard philosophies from never counter offer all the way to,
All right, here's food. Sorry to interrupt, but
to knee-jerk counter offer. And there's, I think that both in the range in between, I've heard people who can articulate their vision clearly, and I still don't have one I feel confident in.
Everybody gets a pizza to themselves, I guess.
I've never been to any event where it was like, oh, we didn't order enough pizza, like, in the history of time, like.
I don't know what
I've
you're all
done it
about.
before. Wow. I've heard out of pizza before.
Well, this is it, right here.
And I think that introduces the question of pay for retention versus pay for performance.
Yeah.
I think those are breadsticks in that bag. And then drinks are outside.
It's freaking loaf of bread, actually. It's got whole loaves of bread.
Thanks for the pizza, looks great.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck.
Slide
Is
it.
he coming back?
Yeah,
Wait, and
he's just out there talking to Ken, one of our others.
Want a plate, you said?
Yes, please.
Do you want me to put a piece on it?
Yeah, a piece of that would whale. Every time I look. Thank you.
There you go.
Thanks for coming.
Man, walking back over here to the side of the table, I'm realizing my camera slides that interesting pictures around all of these. But I find that having all the material up there is more conducive to being able to have an effective discussion and to prioritize what things are most valuable and you want to touch on. So there it is.
Where do you want to start?
I say counter offers.
Okay, that's what do you have one you're thinking about making right now?
No, but I do have my own philosophy, but it could be naive.
I would love to hear about it.
Well, what we try to do is be very proactive in giving raises. We have a schedule where we review it at least twice a year, so that I always ask myself the question, is this person getting paid the amount of money that if they came to me and said, I'm leaving, I got a better offer, I would say, dude, I'm happy for you, right? Are they making that much money? That's what I always want them to be making, because if they come to me and say, hey, I got a better offer, and I think, crap, it's because I'm not paying him enough and he deserves it, then that means I screwed up. So my personal goal is to never need a counteroffer, to always pay them enough that I feel good. It's just like buying a house, right? You want to offer the amount of money that you'll be happy either way. If they accept it, you'll be like, great, I got a good deal. If they say no, then you don't say, oh, I should have given them more, right? You have to give them the amount of money that you're happy with them walking away. But of course, life gets in the way, you're not always like that. So that's the question I always ask, are they worth it? We're in a different environment. It's a nonprofit that's never going away, more or less. So we get to be a little more conservative than other people in a lot of respects at Family Search. But I'll only counteroffer if I feel like I've made a mistake. I wasn't paying them as much as they were worth.
Have you ever been in a situation though where like you physically just couldn't pay them enough money?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
that was my last company.
Because
Like,
they were
we-
so valuable? Or?
Just almost everybody in my company was underpaid because
Oh, yeah.
we just, as far as raw salary numbers go, we couldn't afford to pay people enough. We had a really, really strong benefits package otherwise and a lot of perks and everything else was really good, but our raw salaries weren't enough.
Yeah.
And so the problem that we always ran into is like, it comes up in a lot of these topics is I would have loved to have been all about salary advocacy at that place. I had a few people on my team that I would have loved to just go to and be like, here's $20,000 more. And they would have deserved it and it would have been great. and I just did not have the budget to do it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so what happened is we would get to the end of the year and they're like, okay, your budget is now 3% more than it was last year. And that's all it was. I mean, it's like in a world of perfect life, everyone gets a 3% raise, but it was like, no, I have this guy who's really great, who I need to give 10% to.
That's right.
So
The land is constrained.
So which
we all
people
live
did
in
I give 0% to? Which people do I give 1% to? Which ones do I give 2% to?
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess, and that's something luckily that's less of an issue for me here, but that's the thing I really worry about in counteroffers is that place, we weren't allowed to just give somebody $10,000 more.
Yeah.
If they were to offer to quit though, suddenly there's magic money that somebody pulled out of the air,
Yeah.
and I can now give them a $10,000 raise so they don't quit.
That's bad because that
Yeah.
creates a really toxic culture.
Mhm.
Where they say, we don't appreciate you, but we're afraid of you, right? And so it only takes one or two people doing that before everybody's like, okay, that's the way you get more money.
Yeah,
Let's start
yeah.
interviewing.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
that's always been my concern from the counteroffer standpoint is that, first of all, if someone's only wants to continue to be there
For money.
because
Right.
there's more money on the table, how many months have you bought by giving them
Yeah.
giving a counteroffer? But then second, although it would be great if for some definition of great, it would be great if compensation discussions were always private. They're not. I mean, it's going to get out there somehow, and the impact will be that's how you do the system.
Yeah, yeah.
You guys think money is really the driving factor behind a lot of people looking for income?
It depends on at what level it is, right? So what I saw at Spillman is that very often was. They suddenly realized they could go make $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 more
Yeah.
somewhere else. And that's what would make them payable. Quite honestly, here, we don't have that problem. We pay people plenty.
Yeah.
And so it almost, that's a whole other conversation, but what do you do when you pay somebody enough that paying them more doesn't motivate them anymore?
Right.
Well,
And that's a whole other topic for a whole other meetup, but
yeah.
You check a napkin. this way.
Not
Your
having
total
enough
napkin
money,
order.
not having enough money to counteroffer is kind of built into our business model at the church,
Right.
Family Search, because they pretty much right off the bat say we intend to pay people a little less than market value.
Right.
So from day one, I know I'm not going to compete on money. I'm going to try and pay them something fair, but it's going to be less, always going to be less than what they could make somewhere else. So it's just kind of baked in for me.
That's actually a really great, this idea of when you're having that initial conversation, how much does or should salary play a role in that discussion of why you would want to work here?
Well, so I remember there was I read a book about retention when people are doing a job that's really lousy, right? And they found that you can retain people better just by telling them after they've accepted the job and before they start all of the worst things about the job. And they found that people don't turn down the job more frequently. It's just that because they knew what it was, they end up sticking around way more, right?
Right.
So for me, that's one of the things that comes early on in the discussion is, just so you know, you will never make a lot of money here,
Right.
ever. You're going to be involved in something really important, and you're going to be working with really sharp people, but it will never be
Come here for the right reasons. And I guess everybody, all of us in your crew, we all have to have that conversation about more than money. This is why you're coming here, and are you sure you know why you're coming here? Because
Yeah.
otherwise, I call it what you were talking about, you're a phone call away from leaving.
Yeah.
Right? At any moment, is this person going to get a call from her friend and say,
Yeah.
your boss sucks, you're getting underpaid, you're working way too much or something? Are they just a phone call away from the interview? Once that interview happens, they have a good experience, then you've already kind of lost it. So I like the idea of trying to stay for the up and comers. I think you were mentioning that there's those the people early in their career where they're going up and up and up and up like this. Are you taking care of those people, and are the rest of the people, and they have the rest of the full package? I think you call it the ongoing
Right.
rest of the full package, that when the phone call comes, they're like, I kind of like my job, I don't want to bother right now. That's when you know you're winning. When they get the phone call, and yeah, might as well. I don't mind going to lunch with you, whatever.
Well, I mean, I recently read a book and it was, I'm trying to think of what it's called. It's like The Surprising Fact About Motivating People or something like that. But the basic, concept in there is that most people are not actually motivated by more money. They need to be paid enough such that money is not an issue for them, but anything over that usually doesn't really affect their decision-making process. It doesn't make them work harder, it doesn't make them pick a new job.
Right.
So that's something especially with existing employees, is like, how much do I need to pay this person to make them to get rid of money being an issue? Or if I can't pay them enough money, like my last job, are they good enough with the other benefits that come along with the job that's no longer an issue for them? And I feel like that has to be through, and I feel like it's pretty easy to manage in an initial, assuming you have enough budget for the hire. And I feel like it's reasonably okay in an ongoing plan, if you, especially if you have enough money and you can do salary advocacy. The place I find it really, really challenging is in the apprentice level. Because what happens is you get somebody right out of school, you pay them a very competitive right out of school wage, but within 3 to 4 years, if they're really good, they could be making a senior wage. And the difference between a senior wage and an out of school wage for most places is it could be 2 times as much.
Yeah, it could be.
Place, right? And so that's one I have no idea how to manage. And we were impossibly terrible at it every place I've ever worked.
Yeah.
So for us, we kind of built that into the way that we hire, and we beefed up our training program. So there's a good number of people that we hire out of college and they stick around. There's also a good number of people that we hire, they'll stay for a couple of years and then leave. And I kind of feel that that's inevitable. So we plan for it and we make sure that, well, for one thing, we don't hire people as employees all the time, we hire a lot of contingents. So now the other people in the organization interpret attrition as an opportunity for the other guys that they're already working with to get a permanent spot, right? So it turns attrition into a positive thing. I mean, nobody's happy to see him go, but we make sure that they understand, we know that this isn't the world where you get a job at General Motors and you stay there for your whole life. You're gonna move around. So we're gonna pay you a fair amount. We're not gonna take you for granted, but we understand that eventually you're gonna probably move on, So we beefed up our training.
Let me ask, just throw out the question. It kind of sucks to have to go hire people. Right? So
It's a massive understatement.
right.
Particularly on my mind today.
So, we'll go to a lot of political BS inside of a company, excuse me for the reference, but.
I'm fine.
Okay. We'll go through it in order to save somebody, because if that person leaves, we've got a whole heap of load of work to replace them. And I don't need to denigrate the philosophy. I think that's good. There is to a point where you just say, you know what, this person needs to go out and explore the world on their own terms. Maybe they're going to move out of state or something like that. But dang, instinct as a manager is you've invested 2 or 3 years. Let's keep this person and let's bump their salary 100%. Plan on bumping their salary 100% over the first 4 years of their career.
And the things that I've seen, or I've read about that really could work is this idea that, and it's something that Google does, for instance. My brother works at Google and we chatted about some of their salary bands, but it's this expectation that, nobody will stay at a salary band for too long, and that they will move up through, and if they stay at a specific band for too long, it means they're not right anymore. And they usually see themselves out up until, a specific point that it's like they're band 5 or 6 or something is there.
It's like some people are going to plateau here.
Yeah, and that's perfectly acceptable, but the expectation is, and it's baked into how they budget, that, within 5 years, you're gonna move through these bands, within another 5, you'll move through these bands, and that's just part of the idea. And so it's sort of like, I feel like if you hire somebody right out of school, and you really expect them to be good, and you expect them to grow, you have to not just budget that initial batch and with a 3% increase, but you need to budget, it's less this year. So and I don't know how you guys do it, but for us, a lot of the times it was like, we would budget somewhere between a mid-level or a senior and an entry level, but then if we hired the entry level, we should have been taking that budget we were getting difference and then spread it over the next 3 or 4 years.
Or if somebody quits, like
Yeah.
you have an entry-level person,
Yeah.
they quit, we just say we're gonna close that requisition, we're
Yeah.
gonna use the money
And
elsewhere.
I think that's, in my mind, that's about the only thing that actually works for keeping them around is you know, in telling them that they're gonna be expected to move up, giving them a path and actually setting aside money as early as you can. You know, outside of, I mean, your solution works great in a land of, you know, not enough money, and I've played there too, right? And that's all you can do sometimes, but I don't know, it's.
So we have bands and plan to give them pay increases, so we do pay them more. But if the idea is that I'll have to double their hiring wage, no.
Well, no, right.
That won't happen.
Well, I mean.
Because we don't hire them that cheap.
Right. Well, it just depends on how much range there is for you. I mean,
Well, and I talked to the recruiter at the last, the family search recruiter, and you guys do a whole bunch of work with the universities to hire recent college grads. And I think if we were gonna talk to us, we do a lot of hiring at the senior level and others, and you somewhat avoid the, what did you call it?
The apprentice level?
The apprentice level. You avoid the apprentice level salary bump issue by already.
By hiring past it.
Hiring just past it,
Well,
and
that's what we've done here with it.
Right.
It's like I've got a team full of senior engineers.
yeah.
And it makes it
That's
easy
dangerous.
because I don't have to pay more money, but at the same time, at my last place, you know, we started going through that where we were having a really hard time with that mid-level. And so we hired a bunch of really mediocre senior people. And it was so disappointing. And I had a couple of guys right out of school that were making $25,000, $30,000 less than some of my senior people.
And they're scaring the seniors, right?
And these you know, junior people are wildly more productive.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, I think you hit on it right away, because I've seen that problem with some of my customers where all they do is go hire seniors, and then the problem there is that when you go out to hire a senior, then you're competing on the open market for the senior talent that's available,
Right.
which there's never enough, right? So there's always like a bidding process to go get that person. So then you deal with, are the other seniors being paid equitably to this person that you're bringing in?
And are they producing?
Yeah.
I think to your point, I can't remember your name again.
Nick.
Nick, correct. To Nick's point, you hire, trying to get a senior is a lot harder to benchmark and to say this person's valuable. I mean, even if you have friends and things like that, you get wildly different productivity
Yeah.
levels.
Oh yeah, well the price ranges too vary too. I mean, we'll have a candidate and, you know, realistically to what some of our customers are hiring for, maybe they're willing to pay, 110, and you've got somebody else over here that's hiring at 130 and they'll go get an offer there. And, is he worth 20,000 more? I mean, who really knows?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you really know that in an interview? I think that's part of the challenge too, is I don't think, doesn't matter how many which ways you interview a person, you don't really know what you've got until they've been there a little while, because they've got to learn your systems and that kind of stuff.
So while we're talking about senior people, and you mentioned it, but it was an issue we had a lot in my last job, and that especially when we started hiring senior people, is like to give them, even though we were paying, we were kind of like you, we intentionally said we're a little bit under, average, and we make up for it, and you're doing good works and everything like that. But some of these senior people we brought in were like instantly the top person in the whole department.
Right.
And so, how have you guys dealt with that? Because I was never sure how to deal with it, and it was really sloppy.
So I can tell, first of all, I can say we've not yet. But actually we've sort of gone two directions with the same problem. One is that this problem of like hiring senior people. That was the strategy for Instructure for a while, and the challenge there has been, first of all, like there's never enough of it, right?
Yeah.
And so at the rate we're trying to grow, we do our projections around the things we're going to build this year, and we cannot hire to keep up to expectations. And so that, like, if we're depending on those hires to produce something, then that starts to create that horrible pressure that like lowers the bar and goes, maybe that guy is good enough. Like, he totally bombed the interview, but you know what? It's a warm body.
Yeah.
And so to counteract that, we started going after, like, there was a discussion of, well, if we can't buy them, maybe we can build them, right? Like, maybe we can go after part of the younger market and grow that over time.
Sounds like you need to call Tyler Family Search.
Right.
You guys just hire them away from us.
Well, the thing is, like,
I wait for Tyler to get him good.
well, see, our VP of engineering is from Family Search, and he's like this year said, "Hey, guess what we're doing? Campus program."
Yeah.
Like, and so that's what we're often running with now is trying to get that top level off the bat and grow some senior talent. But that's you know, we're still in the early stages of that, and I don't know if it's gonna work out. At the same time, we've pulled on a couple people that, like, compared to our base range of what we pay our mid-level and senior engineers are, you know, not like an order of magnitude, but well beyond that range. And then you compare those at the end of the year and go, like, is this guy who we hired this year, who's supposed to be like this wizard who does fine, is he really like 30% more valuable than this guy who just never really has asked for a raise? No, and so that gets into the advocacy thing, right? Like, how much should we be advocating for those people who are not going to ask for more themselves?
And that's the position we got into, and the problem is we didn't have enough money to bump up those people who were 30% less, although they were
Probably because you're spending so much.
And quite honestly, for us, the right answer would have been to cut those other people's salaries by 20 to 30%. But of course, you know, that never goes down right. So I don't know how to deal with that at all.
And I think part of one of the inherent problems is when you're thinking about engineers are a lot like athletes, right? I mean, you might have an engineer 1 year out of school. I mean, LeBron James 1 year out of high school was more valuable than probably 95% of the players in the NBA. So just looking at straight experience in the engineering world is really not a good way to value people. It's what can they do, what can they accomplish, what's their productivity. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with like standard HR processes, you know, they want to put people in these bands, and I don't know if there's a good solution, but I think that's one of the inherent problems. Is just that you really are dealing with a talent-based resource that's hard to value just based on years in a role.
Yeah, well, and the value that they've been able to garner for the market. I mean, I might be the oldest person in the room here, but let me just make a couple observations. One is that right now I've got an individual contributor making $180,000 a year, and I've got another engineer a couple years out of college making $80,000 a year. They're really close to the same productivity.
Yeah.
But the judgment and the experience of one that's, you know, our distinguished engineer and architect has earned him that level after 20 years in the field. So when I look at it on the spreadsheet, I go, holy shoot, there's a big discrepancy there.
Right.
You have to count on some element of discretion, I guess, among the engineers, just realizing that, you know, Joshua's been in the industry for a long time, and he has developed multiple SaaS platforms and re-platform and things like that. If I were going to have them cut code and, you know, some AngularJS code or some Node.js script or something, it's not going to be that big of a difference. And it's okay, because when it comes down to the salary conversations between me and the person sitting next to me looking at their total compensation package, it's not going to be fair, it's not going to be equitable. And the more gray hair you get, that experience gets recognized in the industry through higher salary, even though your productivity hasn't really increased.
Well, and I think you get it, because I've long since been an advocate that experience doesn't mean anything. That doesn't necessarily, it's not a deciding factor. Like, I don't have to have 5 years to be senior. I don't have to have 10 years to be an architect.
In the fire service, we used to say, if you've had 20 years of experience, it doesn't matter if it's the same year 20 times.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly. And that's something I push for. That being the case, I still think that in general, somebody with 5 or 10 years of experience just has like more, you know, expertise, especially if they've worked 2 or 3 jobs in that case. Their breadth of knowledge is a lot bigger than somebody who's been one place right out of school who suddenly thinks he has a senior salary. I mean, I had a guy who was 2.5 years out of school who wanted like $120,000. And I'm just like, I'm not going to do that. I think you're a really sharp guy and everything, and you know, like, that doesn't, you know, that.
If you can find something that you
you're
totally
a senior guy, you know, probably, but man, you're a kid, you know.
Well, a lot of times you're paying people to not do things, right? The junior guys will get a whiff of something and say, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
And they'll drive right off a cliff, where a
Right.
senior person would be like, I'm not sure that that's going to end well.
That's the thing that occurs to me in that thing of valuing what's that average thing that makes a 10 or 15 or 20-year developer a little more valuable, is that portfolio of horrendous mistakes they've made.
Yeah.
And the memory they have of it. And so that recognition prime decision making that comes with it, no, we are not going to say that's how we're going to build it, because I've been down this road before and this is what happened.
Right.
And if I think, like in your example of what do I lose if this person who's 3 years in and making $80,000 versus this person who's 20 years in and making 180? What do I lose if that person's not there? It's that memory of, I've been down this road before and there are dragons here and I need to say something before we go
Right.
off that cliff.
Well,
And hopefully they're a magical person
Yeah.
that also still learns.
Right.
Well, it's not always just dragons, but sometimes it's the opposite. I mean, like, I've seen the junior guy who doesn't have any exposure to things, and he was like, "Oh, we need a widget." He's like, "I'll go put a widget." And the senior guy's like, "Oh, I heard that there's a widget that exists. I'll just go grab that."
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And like that can't be valued. I mean, yeah, they produced the same amount, but this guy did it. Like,
That's right.
So
I just want both of them in the organization because you have to have that challenge,
Yeah.
that eager, I love this job and I'm not jaded and I want to go, you want that, and then you want the guy that's been there and done that and go, like what you're saying, Ethan, don't go down that road, there's dragons and dead bodies.
As long as the guy with the experience and the wisdom doesn't tear down the team, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Then he's worth it.
yeah.
Sometimes I've got some people that don't report to me, that if they did report to me, probably wouldn't work at the company.
Right.
That just tear people down, you know?
Right.
And it's based on their experience, and some of the things they say are good, some of them aren't, but, you know, I like that statement that says, we don't employ brilliant jerks. You can't be
Yeah.
brilliant enough to be a jerk. You
Yeah.
just, you can't tear down the team.
Yeah, I brought this up in our hiring conversation last time, but like I interviewed a guy who was just really smart. I'm like, this guy could totally do this job, and nobody wanted to work with him. And we didn't hire him, and he just couldn't figure out why.
That's probably a good move.
He was just like, I totally nailed that interview. Well, yeah, but nobody
Yeah,
likes
no jerk policy.
nobody likes you. So
How do you deal with, you know, obviously, pay is based a lot around the specific skill set they have. So, you know, right now, I would say one of the hotter technologies we're seeing just a ridiculous amount of demand for would be AngularJS, right? So somebody with Angular, with legitimately a year of Angular experience, you know, they can come out and ask for a pretty good salary, even if they're almost right out of school.
Yeah.
Whereas you might have a more senior developer who has some other legacy skills that you still are looking for. They don't have Angular, and they're on your team. So how do you balance things like that?
And I have a very, very applicable experience for that. So I'm specifically trying to hire both mobile and web developers, specifically Angular, specifically, you know, somebody with, and I say I want somebody with, you know, web or iOS or Android, and I can mind you on the team. And what I've found is those people are all wildly overpaid for what they do.
Oh, yeah.
And
Mobile, sure.
the market is just broken. And I've had better success with finding somebody with zero Angular experience and zero mobile experience, who's just a really smart person who knows how to program, bringing them in at a reasonable salary and teaching them that particular skill. Then the people, like we interviewed these people with, I've interviewed 4, 5, 10 people, really depth Angular. They know Angular really well and nothing else. And it's like, and on my team in particular, like that doesn't fly. Like, and maybe it does, but now you're a junior or a mid-level developer.
Yeah,
but like you said, they're thinking they can be the senior guy, and like you're not senior on my team.
Yeah.
And I had the same problem. We went through 4 or 5 mobile developers, and it was like their salary expectations for what their thing was just completely crazy. And it's like they had, you know, the 1 year of experience repeated 5 times or 10 times problem. And honestly, it was probably more like 1 or 2 months of experience repeated.
No,
a lot of time,
no.
multiple years.
Totally right.
And so it's like, you know, we ended up hiring 2 people recently, literally 0 Android experience. They're both very well, good, productive Android developers right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'd be
Totally
better
with you.
off.
I don't think anybody disagrees.
No, that's a real challenge we're running into right now is that expectation of, well, look at the mobile market, like, shouldn't we be paying, and you know, you didn't say it, what, and I think this is the question of like paying for retention versus paying for performance, right? Which is something I've been struggling a lot with, is like, do you give somebody like a huge bump, not because there's somebody who deserves a huge bump or who has really changed anything, but because like, that's what the market says they should bear in order to not leave. I mean, because partly it has to, you know, I want to say that the justification's not there.
So,
And I can compare and contrast a little. I'll just share my experience, like you were saying, Chuck, with the if you're hiring a gunslinger and you've got to develop you've got to transition from classic ASP or something to Node.js and AngularJS or something like that, and you just have to get it done big, and you need to augment your staff. You're going to bring in a hired gun that all they do is
Yeah.
make hip shots, right?
Right.
And you're gonna hire somebody from Tech Systems to come and do it. Oftentimes, you don't wanna hire those people in your company because they're jerks. Or they wanna go make $200 an hour
They just wanna
on
consult.
a
Yeah.
consultancy,
Yeah.
and that's great, and they're gonna go shoot from the hip all the time, and they're gonna make those shots, but we're not always in that same gunfight in the industry. You're gonna get done with your Android app, and you can say, okay, we need to now go do an iPad version of something like that. Well, let's go figure out how we can learn, Objective-C and get that done, and we want people that can work well together.
So back to what you were saying about advocacy, I don't believe in giving people a salary bump for market demand reasons. So just because I heard some other companies paying more money, I don't think it's ever worthwhile to pay more money at my company to match some other random company that exists. Because I feel like, at that point, especially if I'm paying enough, and I am paying enough, like, I care more about what kind of team am I building, what kind of culture am I building. The place where I really think it is worth paying and being a salary advocate, and it happened to me at this company, I was underpaid compared to the other people on the team. And I came in, and they realized that, and they gave me a salary bump. And I really appreciate that, and like, I've come to learn that that's what happened, especially when I became a manager and saw everybody else's salaries, I was like, oh. I really was being underpaid. and so, I mean, especially, if that stuff ever comes through, I mean, like right now, like everybody on my team could probably tell each other their salaries, and I don't think anybody would be upset about it. Because it's all perfectly reasonable based on what it is. So that's where I really like salary advocacy, and I think it makes a ton of sense, but like,
Not just because the market shit.
yeah, if I heard that Instructure was paying $20,000 more than me, I'd be like, okay, if that sounds good, go work at Instructure, like.
There's always gonna be somebody who's gonna pay more, and it depends.
Yeah.
If they get desperate for a specific skill set, like they're saying, and they don't wanna go hire a consultant, then they may get desperate to go hire a person with a certain skill. And so is that equitable for everybody on the team that could go, well, no, because that company's hiring one person at that rate. Because they're desperate and they have a project and they've gotta get it done. And there's a business objective and dollars tied to that. So they'll pay more for that specific person, but that's like a one-off.
Right.
It's not a consistent issue, consistent problem. Yeah, because I've seen the same thing, like, we had a customer here in American Fork a while ago that was looking for Ruby developers. And it was like Ruby or they take PHP. They were open to either. And it was like, for PHP, we could find people 70 to 80K.
Yeah.
For Ruby, it'd be a guy with
Yeah.
2 years and he'd need 100.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, and so we started showing them what the Ruby market looked like. And it took them about a couple weeks and they're like, we'll just go ahead and hire PHP. We'll train them on Ruby if we need that. But it's the same problem. It happens all the time. So yeah, we've seen that happen.
Are you guys, I don't know how to ask the question, but let's talk about the advocate or the apprentice and these people that aren't advocating for themselves, but they are, they're a phone call away from the revelation.
Oh, sure. I've got this one guy, it's on John's team, I'm thinking of James, who, for the value he provides is I would say, vastly underpaid compared to the market, compared to Instructure, just compared to the other people who are there. And he's somebody who just enjoys his work so much right now and doesn't raise his hand up very often. He will never, I don't think he'll ever ask for it. But he totally provides value at the level of someone who makes 10, 15, 20% more than he does.
What are you gonna do?
That's a good question. In my head, I'm right there doing the salaries right now and pushing the plus button on that percentage, going this guy. But I think it's the broader philosophical question, right? Of what is your responsibility to the company and what is your responsibility to the individual in making sure that you're not blowing your budget, but in making sure that people are making it.
And I think a big part of that is your budget. So we had a guy like that in my last company who he was a good engineer. He had been there for a long time. Based on his experience, what he did, definitely underpaid. I knew for fact, just based on his personality and who he was, he would never ask for more money and he would never leave. I tell you, he'll work there until he dies. I'm just sure that he's, his personality and just everything about him. And it was like, okay, well, it came budget time. Well, that guy's underpaid, but he's not going to go anywhere. This guy's underpaid too, and he probably will. I'm going to funnel money towards this guy and not towards this guy. And that makes me feel super dirty, but ultimately it's a business, right? I need to play that game. So
I remember what you were saying, Ethan, what are you pushing the button to make it equitable? The guess the rule of thumb that somebody told me once is, well, make sure they get a good positive message. What would they perceive as a good positive message? And I was at Novell in the late 90s when there was a lot of money going around. There was a lot of, it was not uncommon to have a 15% or 20% across the board budget. And this one guy, who's in Microsoft now, got used to the positive message was you get a 6% increase or more, between a 6 and 10% increase. But pretty soon it's just up and up and up and up.
Right.
So this guy's making a lot of money, and I had to be the one. I was the VP at the time and said, that gentleman, he's already getting paid as much as the top people. We can't do that. We need to take that money. There wasn't as much in the salary bowl. We need to do that elsewhere. But because of that negative message, what his perceived as a negative message, meaning you're getting paid equitably, you're getting huge amounts of money from comparatively, he left the company within 6 months and blamed it on me. And
Because I guess what he was used to hearing is like, this is
Yeah.
the raise you get every year when you do a
right.
good job.
I thought I was doing a great job. I was the top guy, and yeah, you were, and you were getting paid for it. But
So, and
It wasn't there.
I think the key is like you said though, it's what their expectations are and what they expect is the norm or not. So one of the things that we started doing is we were trying to readjust the salaries on a 3% budget, is help people understand, you're either a level 1, 2, or 3, and you can expect as a 1, 2, or 3 to start having your salary slow down at this range. And we started messaging that to people well in advance of the next year's raises. And so where a lot of these people had gotten 3% every year, that was the normal budget, it's like, well, and we had quite a bit of success with this. You didn't get a 3% this year, but as as we talked about, you're capping on this budget, so we're gonna use that to help other people. And that really helped soften that blow a lot. But the other half of that was, there were a couple of people, especially some of our lower paid people, who we wanted to just not necessarily like give them huge raises, but give them a positive message, a little attaboy, okay? And so instead of giving them 3%, which they were expecting, that everybody was expecting, to give them 4%. And for some of these lower paid people, that wasn't even $1,000. I mean, it wasn't that much money at all. And they're just like, oh, I'm doing good, I got 4%. You know what I'm saying? And all we had done is taken, a half or a 1/4% off of one of these top guys that we had messaged was in a top band, and suddenly everyone's feeling pretty good about life.
Right. That percentage spreads a lot more
Yeah.
when you're leveling up the people who are.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does that make sense then? I think, what you're saying is kind of communicating with the team about what's possible.
Mhm.
Having that open communication with like, we're gonna do the best we can for the
Yeah.
entire team, but you gotta understand, if you're gonna be a part of this team,
Right.
and you're one of these guys who's at the higher end, that you're not, the percentage increases, the dollar increase might be the same of somebody up,
Yeah.
but the percentage isn't gonna be the same, right?
Yeah,
So-
no, and I found, especially there, a lot of those people had worked there quite a while, and for a lot of them, they just wanted to know what's going on. Just being really open with them and honest about, we don't have $1 million, and everyone knew it, and it was like, we have this much budget, and, we want to give people the right amount of money, and, we want to raise the standards of what's acceptable, and just being really straightforward, I think, was really beneficial.
Thinking back to my time working at 12 Spokes, which is the company I worked at that got bought by Instructure, part of that initial onboarding message was, we like you say, family search, we are not going to compete on price. That's not going to happen. But the reason is, this company values these things, right? We expect that engineers are going to work 35 hours a week and stop working at that point, because that's what we think. And so that's a significant percent less than you're going to be expected to work at many other companies. Isn't that great? We are a wholly remote company, and you get to work from your home. That means there's no commute. That means that you spend time with your kids. That means that all these other things, and we think those are valuable. We think those are benefits, and that's why we don't compete on salary. And so I had very clear expectations from the beginning, and I think that's part of it. It's something that comes up so frequently in project management, but that it sometimes I forget to apply to other areas. Is in project management, you say it's very important to set the stakeholders' expectations appropriately, so that regardless of the outcome, they have all the transparency they need to see along the way and not feel blindsided by it. And that's really the same thing you're saying, right? Is that when people have like a straight shot and understand the why and understand the narrative, even if it's not like the best message they could possibly have hoped for, they
Yes.
feel significantly different about it than getting even a good bump that was less than what they expected because their expectations were crazy.
Yeah, as long as they don't feel blindsided or surprised in that interview.
And I think we could honestly spend a whole other future topic on how most managers tend to undercommunicate, but I think that's a big part of it, right? It's just like, tell them what's going on, you know, like I have a meeting with my team right now where it's just like, we meet once a week, whether there's stuff to talk about or not, where I just tell them, here's everything I've heard in the last week, you know? and that gives me an opportunity of like, okay, here's the bad news, here's the good news, you know, like, here's everything that's going on.
Some of it, let me throw this question out. Some of it is balancing, I think you might have mentioned this, Ethan, between representing the company
Right.
and representing
You
you as a
responsibility
manager
both.
as part of the company, right? So, I mean, how much do you go in there and say, if you know, you got like a 5% budget for increases or something, and you go in and say, we've got a 5% budget and this is great, I'm totally behind it, this is the deal, or do you go and go, sorry guys, the company's screwing us again. We're only getting 5%, I can't take care of all you guys, but I'll do the best I can. You know, sometimes you feel like,
That's a very, that's
You
the
feel like
same
one or the
impact
other.
and a very different feeling to somebody who's hearing that message.
that's right.
Well, and I remember when I came over to Spillman, before that, I had been getting 5-10% raises at a couple of previous jobs, especially because I was so fresh out of school.
Right, and you
so-
get used to that.
And so I came to Spillman, and it was like, you know, they gave me like the full raise. And I remember that conversation of like, yeah, here you go. And I'm like, thanks. You know, and it's like, they didn't even know why aren't you more grateful for this? And I'm like, because it sucks, you know, what am I gonna say there? But, you know, if that had been really, and I think part of it was that wasn't well, you know, that expectation wasn't set really clear to me at the very beginning. I think that was a big part of it.
And that's something that makes me think this is a problem for us, is that we still are in the stage where we don't have well-defined job families, we don't have well-defined layers along the way, even though we kind of, you know, it's like we've started a sheet that has those things, and we don't communicate well about what those ranges are, probably because we're scared to.
Yeah, most places are.
And so the, like, part of me wants to go, like, that's the answer, we need to stop being scared and just, like, say, that's the deal, we're all on the same ship, and this is what it looks like.
Right.
And I wonder, has anybody gone through a transition like that at the company before, where you've gone from a very out of sight, out of mind
We just
salary?
barely went,
I'd love to hear about it.
without any contact.
Yeah.
It wasn't pleasant, frankly. She started about the same time I was. She was from GE. She came in with salary bands, and they were very firm salary bands. And they benchmarked them with the industry, and they said, "Oh, this is what they are." We're all looking at them, going, "Holy Toledo! No way is that's right. We've got people in these positions that are already above the salary band," and it didn't help the conversation, which is really what you're hoping, is that you talk about salary band. You say, this is gonna help the conversation to say, this is what it's gonna take to move you into the next salary band, and rather than, it felt like it was just a whip to say, to tell the executives and the board that, yeah, we're gonna pay market rates, and this is gonna allow us to project the growth of the company. Say if we hire 100 engineers, this is how much it's gonna
We have
cost.
plannable expectations.
It was for like financial expectations rather than helping the conversation about employees' growth. So we ended up completely redoing it and calling a do-over.
So what was
Added
the do-over?
salary bands, and then it ended up, we widened the salary bands, we wrote job descriptions, rewrote job descriptions for them, help people understand that, these are gonna help us in our conversation, to help us compare and contrast between the SE1, SE2, senior, consulting engineer, all the way up, and help the people, this is what you want in the conversation, to say, in order to move up in that salary band, here are some of the behaviors, here's some of the skills, here's some of the results that you need to produce over time. But it was that initial introduction that just, people, it didn't respond well.
It
because
didn't match your current
It
reality.
it didn't match the current environment, it matched a financial prediction. That it was kind of done in a.
Well, it sounds like it was also done like fairly one
Yeah,
bomb all at
it-
once.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so we got to plan financially, because we're going to get, actually, it was to get some equity in the company and to housing either project.
Yep.
And then it rolled out to everybody and it sucked.
Has anybody else been through one of those?
So we did it at my last job, and we're trying to do it here as well, actually, but, so at the last place, it was like, there were always sort of these like, you know, engineer 1, 2, 3, and it would show up on your like, you know, paper that you signed, and whenever something changed or something, but it was not communicated. And that was a huge issue to people, because it was just like, you know, somebody would suddenly find out that somebody's a 3 or a 1, and it's like,
Feels like you're being graded in secret, right?
yeah, and like, man, it was bad, you know, and we sat down and we actually, you know, drew up the whole, you know, this is what we expect from a 1, this is what we expect from a 2, this is what we expect from a 3, here's how we would expect you to go from being a 1 to a 2, you know, here's the amount of time we expect that to take, and something as simple as that really calmed a lot of people down. But, you know, there was still some issues around like, you know, this guy who, you know, is a 2 on paper, he now knows he's a 2, where is a 2, and now it's like, why am I not a 3? I should be a 3 right now.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, to get you to a 3 though, we have to pay you this much more money. And we don't have enough money to pay you that much more money. And so it was like, it was good because now everyone had this view of what was actually going on, but there were this small handful of people, and it wasn't very many, and it was part of that group of people who, you know, who really do feel like they could just run off anywhere and get another job, and, you know,
Right.
a little bit too full of themselves a little bit, but, you know, and we tried really hard with some of those, you know, with that little 3% budget we had.
But I bet you lost a few, right?
We did. There was at least one guy in particular who, you know, he found out he was a 2 and he really felt like he should have been a 3. And he got a job offer making literally, I think it was $25,000 more than we were offering him.
Oh, he's totally
And it was just
taking
like, good luck, sir, you know, like, yeah.
Totally true.
So it's like, what do? You know, like, it's not much you can do.
Yeah.
So,
I think any kind of change they make, though, you're gonna have that happen. I mean, even if, you know, I had customers that, you know, were waterfall environments and they went to Agile and they lost people because they didn't like stand-up meetings, you know?
100%,
Things
yeah.
like that, you know?
Every time I've ever made any sort of significant change, you see people who just don't shake up. And honestly, I don't think that's a problem. I mean, in my own personal opinion as a manager, if you can't get through stuff like that, then I don't necessarily need you on my team.
Unless it's your number 1 guy, you know, unless it's, you know, if you rank your 10 people,
Yeah.
1 to 10, the top 3 people leave
I-
because of a change, maybe.
Yeah, and I agree. You probably made the wrong change if you did that.
I wish I could pick which people would leave.
Yeah, don't
Jump this
now.
way, he won't like this.
I'm sorry, but that's not allowed.
So I'd like to divert a little bit. So Dave, who was here last time, he actually suggested this topic, and he was sad that he couldn't be here. And one of the reasons I'm trying to get the video going.
Hi, Dave.
He asked some specific questions I'd like to cover, if you guys don't mind. So
Please.
the first one he says is, how do you determine what to pay your engineers? So that's a super broad question, but like, you know.
Well, I take the bands that HR gave to me.
Yeah.
Well, I think
like
that's what you said, Ethan, is you've got these 3 guiding areas here.
Yeah, and I like, at least to me, and only to me, like I'm sure, but you know, we do have some bands there, and part of our evaluation process is like everybody who interviews gets asked, you know, is this person a culture fit? Are they a good problem solver? And one of the other things there is like, who would you compare this person to? And not to say to do a direct tie to how much you would pay them, but like when you evaluate this person, what strengths do they have, what weaknesses do they have, who do they remind you of in the organization, and that gives you at least some benchmark to say like, you know, if those are the things they struggle with, then we shouldn't be an order of magnitude apart in those. So it gives you some place to calibrate from.
That's kind of a guiding principle for me as well. As we'll bring somebody through, and I'll be like, they're like, oh, I liked him. I'm like, did you like him as a senior engineer, a junior engineer, or a middle engineer? I'm gonna ask that, and they'll be like, oh, well, he's not really senior. He's more of a junior engineer. And what I kept finding is those were these like, you know, angular and mobile guys who thought they should be making tons of money, and I just passed on all those guys, right? Because they didn't want a junior salary, and I said, okay, go find a senior salary somewhere then. But I think that's really important.
So comparables.
Yeah.
That is what you're looking for.
And part of that is an ethos of feeling like that, you know, yeah, it is a one-to-one conversation, and like ultimately it's you know, like really the area between that person and the company, but I will not feel good about my job if I feel like I'm being manifestly unfair. And it's never going to be perfectly fair. It's never going to be all right. But if it's like way wrong, then I'm going to feel sick.
Yeah. So how much stock do you guys put into, like, you know, what is the market demand? Like, have you guys ever actually gone out and like had your people do the research on this is what they're paying and where do we fit, and have you adjusted based on that?
So we have, but I think it's like, over several companies, I've seen it be very strategy based. Like Instructure strategy is, we're gonna pay, like, we might not pay above market rates, but we're gonna pay competitively. And so whatever the rates are, like, we're gonna figure out how to be there. We don't always like track how quickly they go up.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge, right? Because then there's that question of, are we bringing in people at rates that are not comparable to what people are making right now, even though there might be a difference in value. But like their strategy is, we will pay at market rates. Like we're gonna try and be fair. 12-spoke strategy was, don't care about market, care a lot about you buying into the value of the company, and we're gonna make sure you're comfortable, right? Like you should get paid fairly, and you should get paid well enough that you're not worried about it. But that's it, no relation to the market at all, no tie, and it was a values thing, right? These are two companies that have different sets of values, and that's okay, but like consistency was the important thing for me. The fact that that was true for everyone at 12 Spokes, and the fact that it's true for everyone in Instructure, means that neither one feels necessarily right or wrong, it's just consistent, and if it's consistent, then it seems, right.
I can see that too, where you have to be very careful because, like, the example of Angular right now, right? Yes, you're gonna pay a premium to get an Angular person right now, but in 2 years, you're probably not.
Yeah.
Those are gonna come down because
Yeah.
the market's gonna shift and more people are gonna have that experience. The pool of candidates is gonna increase, and because of that, the demand, the supply and demand is gonna
It's
kind
gonna
of
be
fix
React
itself.
in 2 years.
Yes. Well, yeah, it was something else. So-
React's already there, man, it's happened.
It is, that's straight up, I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, somebody was just telling me today they're mad about Angular 2.0 or whatever, so.
Everybody is.
But yeah, so.
It'll be fine.
For us, it's Ember 2.0, that's what React is. It can be all
So
sorts
yeah,
of-
so that, that happens, so
Yeah.
if you go out and hire real high right now because of the skill set that's in demand, then, that person's salary is gonna be out of whack with the people you hire 2 years from now from the market, because that market's gonna go down, so now you've hired somebody and the market rates have gone down, so you can't adjust down. You do that, they're gonna.
My own personal experience from, not a lot of years, but some, is that whenever I've hired people who've had a lot of very specific skills, they've been worse engineers than people who were just smart people who I thought could learn. And that has been my experience across the board. So the idea that I would pay a premium unless I had some immediate need.
Exactly. But
Even
that
then, you wouldn't hire them as an employee.
I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I would
you get a
have
consultant.
a consultant or a
That's-
contractor, or, that's what I would do. And
I almost never, so we put the technologies we need, like Angular, on the job description, but I almost never actually interview for it.
yeah.
It's more to advertise to the person, you're gonna get a chance to use these cool technologies,
Right.
rather than don't apply unless you know how to use these, right? David Berggrath, he's always saying, I just want to hire for horsepower, not
Right.
not for having exactly the right size tool
No,
wrench in his toolbox.
yeah, no, you're exactly right. And the thing that I really, shifted around, back to the conversation around hiring though, is I hire for the things that you can't teach. I can't teach somebody how to not be a jerk. Or I can, but I don't want to, right? you can't generally teach somebody just how to be smart or how to learn fast or anything like that. And the other one, especially on where I'm doing a lot of front-end development, it's really hard for me to teach somebody how to care about a user experience.
Yeah.
Right? And so we hired a guy to come do Angular, and he had some Angular experience, but it wasn't like, a ton, but it was just like, man, he just talked about how he built this thing one time, and he, really spent a lot of time focusing on the UI and everything like that. I'm like, you're the guy I need, I can teach you the details, but I can't teach you how to care, So,
Lovely.
That's great.
all right, let's move on to the next question. So the next question he says is, how often do you give raises? Does anybody do anything more than yearly?
We do it twice a year.
3 times a year.
When needed.
We do yearly, but there's the opportunity for a mid-year ban for somebody who has like clearly just shot the moon in that first half.
Yeah.
Is
That's
yours are similar? So it's like almost a guaranteed once a year, but you can't get
It's
one?
merit-based,
Uh-huh.
but, yeah.
Budget, the way we did it was that there's an actual budget increase, and it's usually a pittance, 3%,
Yeah.
that gets peppered in there, but then because we had a lot of people that were growing, we're just hiring, we doubled the size of the team since I've been there. But you find inequities around the apprentice, so rather than having to just deal with these out-of-advance managers, we're just sitting there like, just waiting for the next guy to come to me, I said, okay, let's get rid of it, let's just say 3 times a year, we're gonna do salary evaluations. Once a year, we'll do the actual performance assessment, and then we'll say for those, like, tell them we'll put a star on first, put a star, we'll look them at the next evaluation period, and maybe we'll close an open rec and use that money. So, have to do it that much because we have a lot of people at that apprentice level.
Right, you wanna make sure that you're not stretching it beyond what's likely to lose you in investment.
That's right, especially the yearly cycle.
Yeah.
So something you mentioned, and we've kind of talked about it, but just something I'm curious about, how often have you guys like closed a rec to pay people more money?
At Instructure, never, that I know of.
And
Partly because we're growing so
I've
quickly.
almost never seen anybody do it, but it's something I've wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because it's like, man, you know, if I can keep these guys around, they're more valuable than some random person I get on the street.
We did it at most folks.
Did you?
This is a small company though, right?
Yeah.
And like the deal there was, well, and it wasn't even necessarily that we had an open rec because like we were big enough to have recs.
Right.
Like it was one of those like discussions after work is over, like, should we hire another person? Yeah, maybe we should. No way, if we did that, like, you know, and it was also one of those things where, like, it's a consulting company, right?
Yeah.
So at some level, adding a person adds both income and expenses, and as long as you're adding more income than expenses, that's good, but like, there's a certain scale past which then you need another layer, and that means that you're getting a whole another layer of overhead. And so balancing that transition against what if we just took the money we were planning to put into that and you know, took our top 3 guys and because like, we are way under market, that's
Yeah.
part of the deal, but like, they deserved it, and they need to know like that you know, even though we don't compete on price, that they've shown that much value this year, and it's worth using that money in this way. But that's like the one time.
Yeah, and I've never closed a rec, but we had a senior guy leave or get fired, I don't remember, and we basically said, oh, we're gonna hire a junior guy.
There you go.
And so we dropped, you
Do
know,
it.
$20,000 or $30,000 of salary expectation.
Yep.
And then used that and distributed that money amongst the
We
crowd.
pretty much do that all the time.
Do you?
Well, the policy changes from time to time, but right now, if a senior guy leaves, then we hire first for a junior guy.
Interesting.
And you can take that salary and keep it in your budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what I'll do is we'll take somebody's salary, I'll slice it and put it in my budget as a 20K for my next salary evaluation. And we'll pepper it in there.
Okay.
Also, because I don't know if you guys are so far behind in our hiring,
Yeah.
that there's budget going unspent and the shareholders hate that. They're like, you guys don't know what you're doing. You projected that you needed this amount of money to succeed next year and you haven't.
Well, we had enough people come through the door. We could have hired them all. It would have been a huge mistake.
Right, exactly.
We did getting a little creative with that leftover money and trying to funnel it into other
Yeah,
areas that we need
exactly.
to.
Crap.
So that's pretty much why I've just come to accept that I'm always hiring, even if I don't have a rec. Right? I'm always hiring, I'm always recruiting on campus,
Yeah.
I'm always working on the network, and I'm always screening people and interviewing them, because when it comes, I don't want it to take 3 months to fill,
Yeah.
because that makes me look stupid, you know, and the project suffers, so I'm just always hiring, even if I don't have an opening.
I prefer that philosophy. It's taken me almost a year to hire 3 people. And, you know, granted, I have very high expectations and, you know, especially I'm driving a pretty senior team, so it's like, you know, I don't accept the senior people. So.
You know, oh man, my mind just totally blanked. Like I had a thought based on top of the idea of I don't know what just happened. I guess
The
there's
pizza kicked in.
thought. Yeah, I must be getting tired.
Hiring senior people.
Senior people?
I think that's what derailed me. Is I thought that was funny.
What's the next question?
Next question here is just an open, like, negotiating the salary portion of the offer. And that's actually the one we haven't really talked about. We haven't spent too much time on initial, but,
Yeah.
I mean, how much do you guys, like, I've really struggled with that one personally, of like, you know, you'll talk to them and, you know, I'll have Elliot be like, what's their expectation and what are they making now? And it's like, well, if we go on with this, and, you know, some people will come in like really under what you are expecting to pay, and so I'll kind of like, I'll add 10,000 to that, and then just make them feel really happy about life, and they're still lower up on the team, but, you know, like, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, at least in my opinion, I've almost always tried to deflect away from salary and to say like, you know, that's, well, you know, if it's just a money deal, you know, maybe it is, maybe it's not a good fit, particularly if it's like, this is a good rate. Like, it might not be the best rate you could ever get, but this is a good rate. Like, you know, is there something that makes you like uninterested in working here? Do you not like, or I wouldn't phrase it that way, right? But like, I would try to lean on there are so many good things about being here.
Right.
Do you save it for last though?
Say what for?
Do you save I mean, if you're selling, I call it selling, it's true.
It kind of
Selling,
does.
if you're selling your company
Yeah.
to this individual while they want to work there, in the job interview, you're filtering, you're screening, and you're recruiting at the same time, right? You're talking about, this is what our work environment is like, this is the intangible benefits, this is a yada, yada, yada.
See, I'm trying to plant it then, right?
So you're doing all these types of things to get the person that want to work here, and then you get the offer letter and say, okay, now we're going to talk about money at the end.
Well,
Or is it always all the time?
for me, it's depended on if I thought I was gonna be paying them a lot of money or not.
Right.
And it's like, at my last place, we weren't gonna be paying them a lot of money. So that was never a lead, that was oh, it's so great and you'll love it, and there's a condo you can stay at, and you know, there's soda, and you know, you go through all of those, and then it's like, oh, and then that's what we're gonna pay. And here, you know, in some ways, like our like medical benefits package is not amazing because we have such a huge, you know, workforce, call centers and things. And so we try to make up for that by paying more. And so here I'll be a little bit more like, our salaries are really great, and you know, it's a great thing about this, and you feel really good about your salary. And
No talk about it.
and then, you know, like, so what don't you like about working here? Well, the benefits aren't as good as they could be, you know, like, and kind of push that towards the back until you really make the sell and get them really excited about, like, it's a doorbell cam you can watch on your phone, you know, that's part of my sell here. You get
Everybody's wanted this.
yeah, get them really excited about the product and the team, and then it's like, well, actually, you know.
But I mean, I've done a lot of what you've described in saying like, giving the expectations up front and saying like, you know, we pay well here, but that's, you know, to use 12%, like that's not really what we compete on.
Right.
Like, we're gonna do a good job, we're gonna pay people, enough that it's fair and they should be happy with it. I wouldn't say that, like, you know, you should be happy with what you're, but that, like, that's not a thing where we're reaching to compete on that. But if it comes down to it, like, then it comes to the criticality of the scale, right? Like, there's some roles where, like, a few we've had open this year are the person who's gonna head up our analytics team because we don't have that skill internally. Or the person who's going to be pushing our big data effort because we don't currently have a huge deal of that skill internally, or the person who's going to be I think the title is security architect. You know, in those cases where it's that one, it's not just hiring, you know, for that big, it's that one, it's that one specific vertical skill. I'm like prepared to have the discussion of what's it going to take for that person.
Well, something you said though, and I've had it happen to me, is when it seems like they're like, they just want a little bit more money, or they're just asking for like this kind of, you know, we had a guy in my last job, and it's like everyone really liked him, everyone was really excited, and we were kind of, you know, putting him, he was going to be one of our more senior guys and higher salaries, and then it was like he asked for like $2,000 more, or, you know, $3,000 more.
Totally.
Yeah, an extra week vacation.
And it was just like, fine, and you don't want to lose him over that, but at the same time you're just like, really? Yeah, like is that the thing that was going to keep you? And it's like, you know, I'm okay with that if it's like.
Is it a round number thing? Like, I know sometimes people feel like, you know, 78,000 or 80,000. It's $2,000 apart, but for some reason that psychological.
Well, and
edge
sometimes it is, and you know, kind of say I've done it before, where it's like I was offered, you know, it was an $8,000 difference between two jobs that I had offers on the table for. One of them had a better benefits package, and I knew that. And so, and I eventually ended up working there, but I told them, you know, these guys offer me quite a bit more money. Can you at least give me a little bit token to make me feel like I'm not making a stupid mistake, even though I'm taking less money from you? And, you know, I hope that came off okay. But, you know, since I've become a manager since then, was I that guy? Because, you know,
I've seen so many people will say they'll use their wife in that, you know,
Oh,
my
yeah.
wife is a little bit upset.
Right.
Well, is there anything you can do for me? I'm like, sure.
I've seen that on the
There's a lot
candidate
of
side. I also see it when I work with hiring managers too, where I'm just asking, hey, you know, can you do just a little bit better on this rate? And the answer is, they want the person and they're gonna hire them, even if I said no, but it's just about kind of making somebody happy.
Yeah.
They wanna feel like they won the
Yeah.
negotiations.
Yes.
That's really what it is.
Yes.
And so it's like, sure, man, I'll give you $1 off this guy.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
gotta go back to the client and see if they'll give you, a week of vacation extra or whatever. There are people that are just like that.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. I think on the front end of your dialogue with candidates, one of the things you can do that's really gonna help you at the end in negotiating the salary, and I think you probably all do this, understand why they're looking to leave their current job, why would they want to work for you, what's important to them, what's most important to them in a new position, trying to get a feel for that and trying to kind of rank that, because then, if they come in and they say, well, you know what, where I'm at right now, Nick, my benefits aren't real strong, so really benefits are real important to me.
Right.
And you can kind of say, man, like, we pay well here, but the benefits aren't gonna knock your socks off, so if that's the number one thing for you, man, this may not be it.
Right.
This may not be the right thing. Or same thing, they're passionate about, some certain type of development.
Doorbell cameras.
Yeah, and you're like, well, you're actually, this role, you're not gonna get to do that. So, I think some of those kind of questions on the front end, really understanding what's important to them, they help you at the end too, because I know as a recruiter, if I have a candidate and they're interviewing at 2 different companies, they're interviewing through my competition, they're interviewing through me, and I've done a good job of vetting out exactly what they want, and I found them a position that is exactly what they told me they wanted on the front end. When I make that offer to them, I say, hey, when we spoke initially, you told me that you really wanted a company where you felt good about their mission. Do you feel good about XYZ company's mission? Yes, I do. Do you feel good? You said benefits were pretty important to you, because you've got 3 kids. Does this benefit package sound good to you based on what they've said? Yeah, that sounds good. You said that.
You're talking about being a closer instead of just a salesman.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah.
You're a closer,
Part of
that's
it though,
good.
right?
That's right.
But that's how we've taught all our recruiters to close is you restate
Yeah.
what they've said they were looking for from the very beginning. Do all the things that we talked about match up to what you said you wanted? Yes, they do. And sometimes, it's probably the most frustrating thing in the world. Elliot knows this firsthand. But you get somebody everything they told you they wanted, and they say, you know what, I think I'm just going to stay with my current company. And not even
No, that's right.
not even a counter offer, just like, I'm just going to stay.
I like my friends. I forgot to tell you that I want to work with my friends.
I actually had a guy one time, this is probably the craziest one, but we got him in, he was working in Logan, and Logan, a lot of companies don't pay real well. He's probably making $52,000, had about 4 or 5 years of development experience. So obviously pretty low pay. Said he wanted to get out of Logan, him and his wife wanted to move, blah, 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 all that stuff. So we get him an offer for a position in Ogden. The full-time salary will be about $75,000, but during the contract, the equivalent rate he would make would probably be like 85. Well, we made him the offer, and he came back and he said, hey, I'm going to stay with my current company. They countered me at $56,000, so we now have to stay here.
You want to smack them, right?
And we're like, oh my gosh, like what can we do? Like, this is insanity. What are you? And it really, he tried to kind of put it on his kids, like, well, I told my kids they were potentially going to move. His kids were like 5 and 8, And I was like,
They don't get a vote.
I was like, yeah, your kids are 5 and 8 years old. I mean, it'd be different if they were like both teenagers, like about to graduate,
He
but.
was shopping for an offer so that he could get a
And
counter.
some people do that.
Oh yeah, and obviously for
But
$4,000. Yeah, it was like, but the difference was literally like $16,000 difference. Still stayed up in Logan. So it's like, man, maybe he just really decided he loved Logan. Some people do.
I don't know. I know for me, one of my goals has always been, I want to have everybody on my team really excited about the guy we're hiring, and I want the guy who's starting on my team to be really excited about starting. And so I hate salary negotiations, but if it's the difference is a couple thousand to get them really excited, man, I'll do that, even though it makes me a little less excited.
Have you heard any
But-
contingency moves, like saying, I can't give you X more $1,000 today, and, because I've heard people ask for this, okay, if you can't give me that today, can you give me $6,000 more in 6 months if I do really well?
I personally never done that, and part of it is just because I've never had like a linger budget or a contingency budget, but I wouldn't necessarily be against it, and I mean, I've had instances where I gave them as much, enough for what they were asking, but it was kind of lowball compared to like the rest of the team, and then there's been a contingency that like, oh, if it turns out that he's as good as everybody else, we'll, bump his salary even though he's not expecting that.
I was gonna say, that's a now that rather than an if then, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and
I prefer those.
oh, so, well, and I think everyone does,
Yeah.
one of the books you were talking about earlier was like the Curious Case of Motivating People.
Yeah, he talks about if that's and now that.
Well, and like
That's,
Drive is a book
yeah.
that I think of,
Yeah.
and is along those lines of
Yeah.
like the difference in
maybe that's what the book was.
In human motivation, the now that.
it might be the same.
You're literally describing the book that I read, so I'm guessing it was the same.
Okay, if right. So, you know what? You're saying the subtitle, which there is a subtitle, I can't remember what it is, but the main title is Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it is.
And the significant difference between if then and now that rewards.
Exactly.
If then being you do this thing and you will, it's like
You get a shipment bonus or delivery.
right, yeah, or a sales bonus, something like that, and that it drives a certain kind of mechanistic behavior, and in some specific task types,
Right.
that's what that can be really effective. But that for other task types that are less well defined or less easy to metricize,
Yeah.
that the benefits you get in now that, allowing the gratification to come from the work, but also showing an attaboy from time to time.
Right.
That the overall difference in not just performance but happiness, and therefore better is marked.
I still find that in the software industry, since we're all there, doing the now that's around shipment time quickly turns into a if it.
Right, yeah.
Oh,
And that's mentioned
Yeah.
in the book Drive as well. It's like if you do now that's on this very consistent or obvious
yeah,
pattern,
algorithmically.
then they turn into if then.
You just have to do the now that's in between release cycles and things like that to individuals, not all at once, so you don't have the whole team coming and saying, did all you guys just buy big screen TVs?
This was something that's
It's kind of like Pavlov's dog, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can't, if you give the reward every time, then they lose the mode, they lose that mode, so.
this is something that 12 Spokes did really, really well. My boss there, and here's the funny thing, like it's one of those things where you know what's going on and it still hits you the right way, right? Like, it would be, I'd have a long week and I'd have sent several challenging emails to clients that were like hard to sit over, and I would get like, Monday morning this pastry, I lived in Missouri at the time, this pastry from Le Madeleine over by the library, which showed up at my house, is Queen Amman. And with a note that's saying, saw that thing that you wrote to that one client on Friday, that was amazing, really appreciated what you're doing. And like, this thing costs $5 and probably another $15 to ship it. This is a $20 thing.
Right.
But the impact of it, especially not being like a regular when the impact of it was marketed, made me feel cared for, even though I could see it happening.
Yeah.
Right? I could see that this is not a very expensive thing and that it was not hard to do, but like it appears.
Somebody went out of their way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it made a huge, like, my loyalty to that company was insane.
Yeah.
Well, they also had to know something about what you were doing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I want to spend a whole other topic talking about motivation for sure, of all other time.
Right. Yeah, it's about purpose.
I think there's some great topics there. So I shoot for about 7:30. I mean, I'm happy to keep going as long as you guys want. Is there anything else? I mean, that was about everything Dave had in his list. The only other thing was he says, can we talk about actual salary numbers? Which I don't know how people feel about that.
I gave you guys the range that we've got somebody as high as 180 and as low as.
Do you guys typically have the recruiters like ask compensation, or do you guys ask about compensation in your conversations?
Yes and yes.
Yeah. How do you typically bring it up with them?
Like,
do you get the how much are you guys willing to pay? 'Cause
yeah, I've gotten that question, and I always, man, I feel bad about this, but I was going to go to, that's a really, wide range. There's a whole range of different skills. We want people to be comfortable. It's more about, and I have a huge song and dance that goes with it, but going the other direction, it's usually there's a lot of options out there. The main thing is like is like comfort. Like, what are you good with? And they usually do the same thing. It's like, well, there's a huge range.
Well, so back to my, like, I really like everybody to be happy, and I really push people, like, what's the number you need?
Yeah.
And it's like, most of the time, especially here, I can pay that, or if I know I can't, then I don't even make an offer. Like, I don't want to hire somebody who's grumpy about it.
Right.
And so it's sort of like, where's, and it's like, oh, I can meet that. Or, we had a guy who's like, what's your number? And it was like, honestly, it was way less than what we considered our minimum salary. And so we brought him up to that number. Man, he was over the moon. So I like that real honest conversation, and maybe that's because I'm also that kind of person. Like, if I'm at a interviewing, I'm like, that's how much money I need right there.
Man, I left something big off this list. and it's probably way too big of a topic to cover like in a, oh, is there anything else? But I'll bring it up anyway because it's a good, so one of the things that was really new for me, that I'd not seen before, that David brought with him to Instructure from I believe Family Search, was this idea of saying like role and compensation have nearly no nexus. That in truth people could move, you know, from an engineering role to a team lead role to a management role to various different roles, and that their value hasn't necessarily changed, and puts a lot of, you know, that value should change with your influence at the company, and that may or may not change when you go into a new role, and so there shouldn't be a direct tie to it. And like when I hear that philosophy, I go, okay, I can buy into that, it makes sense to me. But at the same time, it's so orthogonal to what many people are experiencing. You find that you have that conversation over and over and over and over and over again.
Right.
And it sounds like you've got some great thoughts on it.
So I just want to share something that I personally believe in, but you often hear about a career ladder, and I prefer, and it's something Jeff and I implemented at Spillman, but something more of a career lattice, where you basically, instead of having like, you know, I go here and then I go here, you know, we were trying to implement this one, and we would have, you know, ours was kind of like a 3x3 give or take. And we actually had more levels like this, but it was sort of like, you know, this was like the software dev, this was the, it's actually this way, the software dev, this was like managers, this was test engineers, you know, this was like manual QA, and I think that was here, but it's like, but the idea being that, you know, there was nothing wrong with any of these. Right? But the expectation that, you know, if I'm an architect here, you know, here, that's really the same as a lead in the management track. Or if I'm a principal here, that's the same as a proper manager here. And that's something we're trying to do here as well. And it's definitely what I prefer, is that, you know, and you can still make those expectations clear to people that, you know, this guy's probably going to get paid more than you, because even though, you know, he's over to the side, but I love the idea, and it's something I feel most software companies do wrong, is that they'll have lead or manager go out here, and then it looks like this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's like, I want to make more money, I have to go to management.
Yeah.
Yes.
Boy, I really prefer writing software, but I'm going to be a manager for a paycheck.
And that may be a whole other conversation, but I feel like way too many people.
Yeah.
I could show you, I could pull out the slide deck and we just rolled out again. We had the problem that we actually had a grade level architect, but very often on the team, you'll have a senior engineer that will be the architect for that one component of software, and they're like, why is that person got the role of architect? Do I have to move to the architecture team? And so the difference between career level and role are separated. I think that's what you're saying.
Totally.
Right. Totally agree.
I think a lot of it is being able to socialize that expectation rather than having it being a hidden thing.
Right.
And that was the big key for us at my last place, is making it really clear that, like, you know, if you're a test engineer, that's not a lesser role than a regular engineer. It's like, it's the same, you know.
Right.
That's right.
And it's, you know, and we were actually trying to, you know, glamorize our test engineers and like move them like one track over and be like, it's actually a better thing. Like, you should be a test engineer, right? Because it had this kind of stigma.
Oh, yeah.
It was hard.
I think now that you're hearing the term software developer, software engineer in test,
Yeah.
like the test is at the very end.
Well, and that's
people like feel more comfortable with it.
Yeah, and
When it's
we-
like test in dev, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's test.
Yeah, we had software development engineers and software development engineers in tests.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how we called them. We're trying to do something similar.
That's the
It's
way-
funny how the title can make that big of a difference, but I've noticed that too.
We've also allowed people to shift expectations as well. That, frankly, that in the modern industry, that if you are a manual test engineer, you will have a career cap.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
allowed us to set that expectation
Yeah.
rather than saying
Oh.
there's this weird.
Has that helped you do them? Because like that's been a challenge for us, is finding the right way to make that change from having predominantly manual test to
Right.
predominantly automated test.
Yeah.
But that's a really good way to put it. Like, you know, it's not necessarily it's going to